Hi, I'm Dr. Joe Caffrey, a senior scientist heading up the invasive species unit of Inland Fisheries Ireland. Of the 13 priority or high impact invasive species that currently infest Irish watercourses, 7 are aquatic or riparian species. 2 of these high impact species, named the curly-leaved waterweed, Lagarosiphon major, and Nuttall's Pondweed or Elodea nuttallii, belong to the same family, and this can cause problems with their identification because they share many features. A further complication to this is that there is another related species currently occupying our watercourses. This is a plant called Canadian pondweed or Elodea canadensis, and like the other 2, it shares many physical characteristics. What I'd hope to do in this short clip is to afford you the capacity to readily identify these species either in the field or in the laboratory. Here we have the 3 species I spoke of. We have here Lagarosiphon major, Elodea nuttallii and Elodea canadensis. Interesting to note that while they are all very similar, this species here was invasive in Ireland maybe 200 years ago, but currently we don't regard it as an invasive species in that it doesn't threaten ecosystems, and it's actually categorized now as a naturalized non-native species. Lagarosiphon has a very characteristic arrangement, particularly towards the tip. You will notice here that each of the apices or tips of the stems, the leaves are very tightly clustered. This is very characteristic of the species. Looking at the closely related Elodea species, you'll notice with Elodea nuttallii, the other invasive species, that there is not that distinct clustering, nor with the naturalized species do you have that clustering. But one of the simplest ways to distinguish Lagarosiphon from the 2 Elodea species is by virtue of the leaf arrangement. And if you look along the stem, particularly back from the tip, you'll notice that the leaves are very strongly recurved back. All of the leaves are recurved back towards the stem, but crucially, they have a spiral arrangement. So the leaves are arranged spirally up the stem. This is very different to the 2 Elodea species. Moving on to the 2 Elodea species, these can be much more difficult to distinguish. They have features in common that distinguishes them from Lagarosiphon. And you will notice with the 2 Elodea species that the leaves are arranged in a whorl, almost always of 3 leaves. A whorl means that they cluster at the same point on the stem. Here you see the leaves clustering in nuttallii, and if we move to any area on Elodea canadensis, you will likewise see the whorl or the cluster at the one node. So that's the similarity. What are the differences? The differences mainly relate to leaf shape. And what I've done is I've taken a leaf from each of the Elodea species and put them under the microscope, and I'll show you now in detail how you can separate these 2 species. Here we have one leaf from each of Elodea canadensis, which is our naturalized species, and Elodea nuttallii, which is our invasive species. You'll see immediately that these are quite different. The main differences are Elodea is distinctly tongue-shaped, and that goes for leaves from the top more or less to the bottom of the stem. With Elodea canadensis, the leaf is broadest around mid-stem, whereas with nuttallii it's broadest at the base. Elodea nuttallii characteristically tapers reasonably quickly to a fine point, whereas the tapering is much less abrupt with canadensis, and we don't have a tip, we have a blunt tip rather than a sharp tip. Both plants are minutely toothed along the edge, and how you know that is by running your finger along and you will feel a minor serration. Another distinguishing feature between these plants relates to the stem, and this is something that you mightn't find in the books, but the stem in Lagarosiphon, the stem is hollow, and when under the influence of wave action or wind action, the stem actually readily snaps. That doesn't occur with either of the other two species. Should you encounter either of these two invasive species, that is Lagarosiphon major or Elodea nuttallii, while you're out fishing, boating or walking, we'd be very much obliged if you would report the sighting to info@fisheriesireland.ie, or we also have a 24-hour emergency number, and that number is 1890 FISH 24. That's 1890 347424. Thank you.